And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is David A. Fields. David is a consultant, a speaker, and a best-selling author. David helps build consulting practices that are lucrative and lifestyle friendly. He's guided consultancies ranging from one-person startups to the consulting divisions in some of the world's largest companies. So, welcome aboard, David. How are you today?
Thank you, Peter. I'm doing outstanding, and it's really an honor to be part of your podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming on board. So what I want to talk about is you're in an interesting place in that your business is really making other consultants and advisors and such successful. And obviously you need to be successful in order to do that. You've written a book, you've got content, you've got thought leadership. So if I were to come to you as an advisor, a consultant, a coach, what would you be telling me to do relative specifically, because I'm sure there's a lot of other things, to building a platform and thought leadership and content? What sort of, where would you be pushing me in that,
Hmm.
under that framework?
What an interesting question. And just for clarification purposes, there's actually a couple books out. But where would I be pushing you if you were some sort of advisor, a consultant, or something like that? The first thing I would tell you is if you're interested in being a thought leader, if you're interested in getting thought leadership out there, is to be prolific, is to just write. The example I sometimes bring up is Gershwin, who apparently was, the Gershwin songbook, of course, is unbelievable,
Sure.
right? Yeah, even youngsters hopefully know Gershwin. But what folks don't realize is he apparently wrote a song every day. He literally wrote a song every day. So you must think of all of the really terrible songs he must have written in order to become, one of the geniuses of modern music.
Right. So if you want to be, so what you're saying is if you want to be a thought leader, think, right? And think and write, get it out
Well,
there. Yeah. Yeah.
practice,
Yeah.
practice,
Yeah.
practice, practice. Get it out there. Don't be so scared. A lot of folks sit sort of at the bottom of the mountain and think, "Oh man, this I want to be at the top. I want to be at the top of the mountain, but I don't want to go through all these steps. I don't want to have bad content. I don't want to have
Yeah.
mediocre
No, of course.
content. I don't want
Right.
to have good
Right.
content, right? But you got to go through those steps, and no one really cares. No one really cares. If you write an article or you write a book, you write a white paper, you publish an episode of a podcast, and it's mediocre, people are like, oh, okay, that one wasn't so great. But they don't ding you for it. They just wait for the next one that's good.
Yeah. So I like that thought because I think what happens is we get too stuck in our heads and say, "Oh man, let me tweak that a little more. It's not so good, right?" And you're better off getting out something that's at least mediocre, right, consistently than infrequently getting out something that you think is ideal. So don't put crap out there. You got to put some thought and effort. But by definition,
Absolutely.
most of things that we do most of the time will be average, mundane, and that's better than not getting it out.
Absolutely right. And look, if you write something and it's kind of lousy, you don't have to publish it.
Right, right, right.
In the other example I'll give, and this is not an example of something lousy, but my first book, which was published by McGraw-Hill, I was very fortunate because I had a few publishers
Hmm.
interested.
Hmm.
And as any author knows, when you're doing nonfiction and you're getting commercially published, you start with a
Yep.
proposal. And that proposal has a sample chapter in it.
Yep.
My sample chapter, which garnered bids from, I think, 3 or 4 different publishing houses, never made it into the book.
That's
Right? I
pretty
mean,
ironic.
which is
Right, right.
hysterical. Yeah, it is. It is. It's crazy. I just could never get it to the place where I felt like it lived up to what I was trying to deliver. But you know what? It did the job.
Right,
It
right.
got me, publishing deal.
So how are you seeing the folks that you work with effectively? Because I'm really want to get to the benefit of effectively deploying content and thought leadership to drive your business outcomes, which in the case of consultants,
Sure.
coaches, advisors is to either stand out in the crowd, right, differentiate, add cachet to your brand, and ultimately the holy grail is net new client acquisition. So what are you seeing there?
Well, again, it's hard work. Let's be clear.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if we're talking books specifically,
No, no, no. It could be book, it could
any
be
kind of thought
articles,
leadership,
yeah. I mean, I think book is like saying, I haven't exercised in like 9 months, but there's a marathon coming up. I'd like to do that, right?
yeah. Yeah, though what I will tell you, I mean, it creates clients, right? I mean, I
Yes.
have 2 books out. The first one, a handful of people probably read, but it instantly made me 6 figures in business. The newer book, The Irresistible Consultant's Guide to Winning Clients, that, is in the airport bookstores,
Yep.
and so I get calls from all over the world. So, that is, as you said, I mean, that might be kind of the marathon, and that's hard work. But thought leadership really does 2 things for you, and the process of creating thought leadership, I think, does a few things for you. One is the process of creating thought leaderships helps you solidify your own thinking.
Right.
It makes you crystallize your own ideas, and that is vitally important.
So I want to push on that for a minute because you went through that quickly. So whether it's a book or an article, it's a forcing mechanism to get you to articulate something that you've been thinking about or working on or whatever in a way that is clear and concise to others, which is a very big hurdle for many. So just the fact that it forces you to say, wait, how do I sequence this? What's an example of a story I can use? That's got value in and of itself. So that's a
It's got
great point you
massive
make. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got massive value. You have to have your own thinking crystal clear and consolidated into a compelling, concise message. And when you have that, not only can you articulate your message in a way that's compelling, your prospects can articulate it. They can articulate it to themselves, which they have to do in order to then take action. And they can articulate it to others, colleagues, a boss, if they're not the person with the purse strings.
Sure,
So you
sure.
have to remember, it's not enough that you know your core idea. You need other people to be able to repeat your core idea, again, in their own voice or to
Yep,
others.
and
Go on.
in the world that we're living in today, particularly on the mid to large size corporate level, decisions have now become a team sport, right? It used to be most decisions, most of the times on the buy side was a one person operation, right? I'm the head of technology, you're selling technology, I'll make a decision. The last article I read in HBR on this is I think it's like 7.2 people are involved in enterprise decisions. So that's the definition of a game of telephone. But if I've got your book in my hands and I say, listen, the reason we're bringing David into the firm is he's the smartest at it. By the way, take a look at his book, right? It's not going to get lost in translation, having to go from Mary to Jane to Sally to whoever.
Exactly right. Or if the core idea is, look, this guy's got a message and it's about how do you win more projects from more clients at higher fees.
Yep.
That's a repeatable
Yep.
message. And you want your message to be repeatable. Or I have core concepts in there. The idea of right side up thinking,
Yep.
which is customer focused. I can't tell you how many consultants and how many firms now just use that sort of nomenclature, that idea, and that's what you're looking for. Again, is not just to have ideas, but to create your ideas in sort of a wrap them in some sort of way that's easy for people to repeat. Not just to understand, but to understand and repeat. So that's one huge advantage, I think, to creating thought leadership is just crystallizing and making your own ideas better. Obviously, there's the awareness building, the visibility building aspect of thought leadership. When you put thought leadership out there into the world, it creates the opportunity for people to find you, for people to recognize you, for people to say, "Oh, look, you're the guy who did this. You're
Right.
the guy who had the podcast on that or wrote the white paper."
Got it.
And so just straight out visibility. I'm obviously talking about stuff where you're probably more the expert than I am. But I see sort of a third benefit as just being
Yep.
credentials.
Absolutely.
You're the author, therefore you're the authority. And you're the person on stage, you're the authority. You're the person who writes the white paper, did the
Yep.
research, has the ideas, is stating with conviction, therefore makes you credible. So I think credibility, awareness building or visibility building, and helping you form your own ideas better are 3 advantages.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts. So let's move from because a lot of what you're talking about there, first of all, I agree, is about the benefits of creating great content. I think the place that a lot of people then
Yeah,
struggle is, so they've got some great stuff. They clearly have something to say. They're the experts in their field, et cetera, et cetera. Is not really understanding how to get it out
sure.
in front of the right people. Because if we're all honest with ourselves, like your book title, by the way, is great because it tells me that that eight people out of 10 or nine people out of 10 that walk by that airport bookstore would have absolutely no interest in buying that, nor should they, right? But to the 1 in 10 that it relates to, or whatever the actual metric is, it's highly relevant. So how do you know, or what have you seen people doing to get the content in front of the right people? Because you put it in front of the wrong people, who cares?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a few answers to that. Also, just as a quick aside, the irony about the title of my book is I absolutely hate the title of my book, and I never liked it. And so I had contests, I had brainstorming sessions. We just came up with as many different titles as we could, and kept testing them against the ultimate
Hmm.
title, which shorthand is Guide to Winning Clients. And the Guide to Winning Clients just won over and over again. And finally, I gave up. I submitted to the market. The market said that's the title, and there you go. Um, so I'm frequently asked, what marketing should we do?
Yep.
What vehicle should we use? And my answer is always the one you will do.
Yeah.
Meaning, it
That's the
makes
difference
no
between
sense.
the theoretical and the applied, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, there's no sense in me saying, well, what you should really do to get in front of your target is go out and speak. If your knees knock and you freeze and you sweat and are at risk of cardiac arrest at the idea of going on the stage. So the most important marketing is whatever you will do, with one exception, which is you have to do outreach. Right? You absolutely have
Yes.
to do
Yes.
one-on-one connections. And if you can do one-on-one connections, you can get your thought leadership in front of your contacts, in front of your targets, in front of your audience by simply one-on-one, or a mass communication to your own tribe. So, that's kind of the non-negotiable way of doing it. The After that, whether or not you're going to do podcasts, or you're going to do white papers, or you're going to do books, or you're going to do speeches, usually the best channel is through some sort of related trade association.
So give an example. Can you give an
Yeah,
example either from
yeah, sure,
yourself or a client?
sure, of course. So I give all sort of example after example.
Sure.
One of the best is there's a small consulting firm out of Virginia I work with that targets the healthcare sector. They target the actually medical affairs group, and so one of the first things we did was looked at, how are we going to create thought leadership? How are we going to get it out into the
Right.
world?
Right.
And so they identified a specific association. I'm not going to give the name of the
Okay.
association because I don't want to create stress for them and all of that. But specific association, XYZ association, which was targeted directly to their audience, to their buyers, to their decision makers. And uh, they created a connection and said, look, we can help create value for your members. And they did one of my absolute favorite all-time best ways to create thought leadership, in my opinion, is they collaborated with the association, with the executive director, and said, we'll do a survey. We'll do all the hard work. We will do all the heavy
Yep.
lifting.
We'll do the analytics. We'll compile the report. We'll right. Right. Right.
Everything.
You get free valuable content to your membership.
Exactly. And so they ended up with a beautiful white paper, just, absolutely stunning in its conclusions and in its value to the members of this association. They ended up on stage. And most importantly, they got the list of every single person in the association, and they got to reach out to every single one, and
Which
just
is
created massive.
phenomenal. Right.
Right. And for us, what we were trying to do is lower their portfolio risk because they were too tied up in too few clients. So how do we get into more clients? Well, we get into more clients by creating awareness among specific decision makers. Bingo.
Phenomenal.
So yeah, so that's one example. But there's for that example, I could probably give 50 more. So
Fantastic.
trade associations are really outstanding if you're in the advisory business.
So we sort of skipped a step inadvertently when we
Okay.
went to trade associations. And what I mean by
Okay.
that is, we talked about the content, we talked about developing it, we talked about getting it out there from a distribution standpoint. The trade association assumes that you've got clarity around who your client avatar is, right? So in the case of the trade association, my assumption is it's the association's done the job of getting lots of those people together. But talk about the work that advisors and consultants and such need to do to be really, really clear about who they serve. Because I think some people try to be generalist, and that's a slippery slope.
Well, that's just a massive mistake, to try to be a generalist. And at such point as your firm is over $100 million, you can start to travel in those generalist worlds. Other than that, it's a massive mistake. The research on this is absolutely incontrovertible.
Yep.
It's the very first thing that buyers look for when they're looking for a consultant, and I talk about consultants because that's my world.
Sure.
They look for industry expertise.
Yep. Okay.
Whether they should or not is irrelevant. That's what they look for. And so, yes, you have to know your industry. You have to know who you're targeting as narrowly as possible and what problem you're solving for them.
Got it. So if they're looking for industry experts and they're going to obviously their industry trade association, and you have some rapport relationship, your stuff's there, it's a de facto endorsement of the association that David is a recognized expert. He knows our space. He's one of us.
That's exactly right. Now, there can be functional experts, and
Sure.
you might be the type of firm that really focuses across industries in a certain function or a certain situation, post merger integration. What I would suggest is, for the vast majority of folks out there, again, if your business is under $100 million, you should still have an industry
Yep.
focus.
Yep.
And again, my own personal experience with that, with all of my clients, has been, you show me a solo consultant who's struggling, who's making under $200,000, and I'll show you a
Yeah.
generalist.
100%.
You
100%.
right? You show me a $20 million, $30 million consulting firm, and I'll show you someone who's very specific. I mean, I work with folks who target only municipalities in California for a specific function inside the municipalities in California, and they're an 8-figure firm.
Well, and I would also argue it's easy for them to make decisions, or easier, around where to invest marketing dollars and such, right? They're not going to the
Of course.
Nevada, Transportation Association conference. They know exactly, sometimes the size of your market might be 50, 100 people that are the key people, which is a blessing and a curse. When you look at it as a blessing, it's like, okay, that's who I need to spend all my time trying to influence, connect, relate to.
Yeah. I mean, I work with a small group out in Colorado who he would write thought leadership pieces, the owner of this firm. And he wrote books, and the target audience for his book was about 12 people. And, they're very, very
Yep.
technical, but he knew that those 12 people, when they needed help, they'd come to him. And so it's quite successful. Now, by and large, I typically, the rule of thumb I give to folks is about 300. If you have a market of about 300 decision makers, you're good. You're good to go. And again, obviously it depends a little bit on the size of the firm. But if you have 300 decision makers who know you, with whom, who will call you, you can build an 8-figure practice.
Fantastic. So we start to wrap up here, David. Any
Sure.
final thoughts, do's, don'ts as it relates to leveraging and scaling a consulting practice through content and thought leadership? Which, by the way, we're eating our own dog food, given how niche that sentence was.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As with everything, my advice is, remember, it's not about you; it's about them. It's about the
Right.
listener or the reader. That's right side up thinking. So you don't you don't talk about a topic because you think it's interesting. You talk about a topic because they think it's interesting. You don't research something because you think it's cool or be helpful. You research it because they have told you they need that. So it's all about them. That would be kind of the underlying core piece. I'll throw in. Do I have time for one more?
Yep. Sure.
Okay, so that was philosophical. Now I'll throw in something tactical. My tactical advice is to spend more time than you think it deserves on your headline or your title.
Okay.
That's half the battle. You have to get people to pick up your book. You have to get people to read your article, to attend your speech, to listen to your podcast. And that's, you don't want to go quite to the point of clickbait, but there's a reason clickbait exists. And
Right.
the
So
people
it's the theory of clip bait, not at the level of bait and switch.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of.
exactly. You really, really need to focus on, what is that provocative headline that provocative title. And when you develop that, when you spend sufficient time on that, you'll find it easier, for instance, to win speaking gigs, which can be quite difficult otherwise.
I love it. Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing with us today. And I think we both learned a lot, and hopefully everybody listening did as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate being on here. Thanks so much,
Oh,
Peter.
my pleasure. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.